The emergency alert yanked Kyle Thas from his morning briefing with a message that made his blood freeze. Containment breach. Multiple apex predators. Casualty protocol activated. He sprinted to the observation deck, already calling for the emergency response team, already preparing himself for the carnage. 3 apex predator cubs from 3 different death worlds, all housed in the same containment unit. It should have been impossible. The automated systems had multiple fail-safes specifically designed to prevent exactly this scenario. Vrax hunters, Scarion stalkers, and Thulian ravagers didn't just compete. They killed each other on instinct. Their species had been mortal enemies for millions of years of evolution across neighboring star systems. The containment room door was sealed, which was protocol. Through the reinforced viewing panel, Kyle Thas could see. He stopped dead. The cubs were sleeping, all 3 of them, in a pile, together. "Sir?" His assistant's voice crackled through his comm. "Emergency xenobiology team is 30 seconds out. Should we prepare sedation protocols?" Kyle Thas couldn't answer. He was staring at an impossibility. The Vrax cub, barely 3 weeks old but already sporting the razor-sharp dorsal spines that made its species the terror of the Outer Rim, had its head resting on the Scarion's flank. The Scarion, whose species literally hunted Vrax adults for sport, was curled protectively around the smallest one, the Thulian Ravager cub, whose venom sacs should have been instinctively pumping at the proximity of natural enemies. They were breathing in sync, peacefully. "Sir, the sedation. Belay that." Kyle Thas pressed closer to the viewing panel. "Pull up the security footage. Last 2 hours, now." The footage loaded on his wrist display, and he scrubbed backward through the timeline. There, 4 hours ago. The cubs had been brought in separately. Standard procedure for new arrivals at the Galactic Predator Conservation Center. Each in isolation cages, each displaying appropriate aggressive posturing despite their age. Then the automated system had malfunctioned. All 3 isolation units had opened simultaneously, depositing the cubs into the main containment room. Kyle Thas watched what should have been a bloodbath. The cubs had immediately postured, displaying every threatening behavior their infant bodies could manage. The Vrax cub's spines had erected fully. The Scarion had opened its jaw to show emerging fangs. The Thulian's tail had arched in the pre-strike position. And then the human had walked in. What? Kyle Thas felt his secondary heart skip. Why was a human in the predator containment area? The footage showed the human female, small even by human standards, dressed in the simple coveralls of a junior caretaker, entering through the personnel door. She'd glanced at her datapad, apparently not even noticing the 3 apex predator cubs frozen in mid-threat display. "Oh, hey little ones." Her voice came through clearly on the audio feed. "You all look tired. I know, big day, new place, scary stuff." She'd set something down. A physical notebook, Kyle Thas realized with growing disbelief, and simply sat cross-legged on the floor a few feet from the cubs. Then she'd started humming. Some simple melody, rhythmic and soft. The cubs' aggressive postures had faltered. One by one, they'd turned from each other to stare at the human. She'd kept humming, occasionally writing in her notebook, completely unconcerned. 20 minutes later, the cubs had approached. Not her, but the notebook. They'd sniffed it, pawed at it gently, then settled around it. The human had stood, still humming, and walked out. The cubs had stayed there, gathering closer, until they'd formed the impossible pile currently sleeping in the containment room. The human's notebook lay open beneath them, pages covered in handwritten notes and simple sketches. "Get me Vexia from Xenobiology." Kael'thas ordered, his voice tight. And find out who authorized a human caretaker in an apex predator zone. Sir, that's Emma Johnson. She's a volunteer from the human homeworld. Animal shelter experience. She was only supposed to be checking food dispensers. Kael'thas stared at the sleeping cubs. 3 species that represented the pinnacle of predatory evolution in their respective systems. 3 species whose adults killed each other without hesitation. 3 infants who should have been ripping each other apart. Instead, they were cuddled together like they were family, sleeping peacefully around a human's notebook. "Vexia is here, sir," his assistant announced as the xenobiology specialist rushed onto the observation deck. Vexia took one look through the viewing panel and went completely still. That's not possible." "I have footage," Kael'thas said grimly. "It gets worse. Because if a human could accidentally stop apex predators from killing each other, if whatever she'd done had overridden millions of years of evolutionary hostility, then everything they understood about predator biology, about interspecies conflict, about the fundamental nature of aggression itself might be wrong. And every major research institution in the galaxy was going to want answers he didn't have." Vexia deployed her portable scanning array, pressing the sensors against the containment wall. Her 4 eyes widened as the data streamed across her display. "Their neurological patterns are synchronized," she whispered, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the impossible scene before them. "Kael'thas, predators don't do this, especially not apex predators from competing species." "Define synchronized." Kael'thas moved beside her, studying the readouts. Their sleep cycles are matching perfectly. Deep REM state, all 3 of them, entering and exiting phases within seconds of each other. Vexia's manipulator appendages flew across her controls. And their stress hormone levels. Cortisol analogs are at baseline, actually below baseline. They're more relaxed than they should be in familiar territory with their own family groups. Kael'thas watched the Scarion cub shift slightly in its sleep, and the Vrax cub immediately adjusted position to maintain contact. "They're cuddling. I can see that, and it's biologically absurd." Vexia ran another scan. "The Thulian's venom sacs are completely dormant. Do you understand what that means? Those sacs activate in response to threat presence. The Scarion is a threat. Its species hunts Thulian adults. That cub should be in constant defensive mode. But it's not. No, it's sleeping, peacefully, while touching its natural predator." Vexia pulled up a communication interface. "I'm bringing in Zara. If anyone can explain this, it's her." The senior xenobiologist's holographic form materialized within minutes, her tentacles writhing in agitation as she reviewed the data. Zara had spent 4 decades studying predator biology across 300 species. She'd written the definitive text on apex predator behavior. She stared at the scans for a full minute in silence. "This is theoretically impossible," Zara finally said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "I need you to check for sedatives, airborne compounds, pheromone manipulation, anything that could artificially suppress aggression." Vexia was already running the analysis. "Environmental scan is clean. No foreign compounds detected. Mind control? Neural inhibitors? Negative. Their brain activity is completely natural, just inexplicably calm. Run a structural integrity check on the containment field. Maybe there's radiation affecting their neural chemistry." Kael'thas pulled up the system's diagnostic. All green. Field is operating at standard parameters. Zara's hologram flickered as she processed this. "Show me the human's entry again, every detail." They replayed the footage. this time with all sensor data overlaid. Emma Johnson had walked into a room containing 3 aggressive apex predator cubs with nothing but a datapad and a paper notebook. No protective equipment, no weapons, no special devices. "She's not doing anything," Vexia observed. "She just talks to them." "Hey, little ones, you all look tired. I know, big day, new place, scary stuff." The human's voice was soft, casual. She'd set down her notebook. The analysts confirmed it was just paper and ink, nothing technological, and sat on the floor. Then she'd started humming. Some simple, repetitive melody with no discernible pattern that would affect predator neurology. The cub's aggression drops 30% within the first minute of her presence, Zara noted, tracking the biometric data. 60% by minute 3. By minute 5, they're approaching her location. Not her, Kyle Thas corrected. The notebook. They watched as the cubs, moving cautiously at first, converged on the human's notebook. The Vrax cub touched it with its snout. The Scarion pawed at the pages gently, surprisingly delicate for a creature that would grow up to tear through reinforced hulls. The Thulian had actually climbed onto it, settling its small body across the open pages. "They're treating it like a comfort object," Vexia said slowly, "like juveniles with a parent scent marker." Emma had stood after 20 minutes, still humming, and simply walked out. The cubs had stayed with the notebook. Then gradually, they'd moved closer to each other. "I need to examine that notebook," Kyle Thas decided. "Whatever's affecting them might be concentrated there." "Sir, I strongly advise against entering. I'll use full protective gear. Remote won't give us the detail we need." He was already suiting up in the Apex Predator response armor, enough protection to survive a full-grown Vrax attack for at least 30 seconds. The containment room door opened with a hiss that echoed loudly in the silence. All 3 cubs' eyes snapped open simultaneously. The Vrax cub's spines erected with an audible click. The Scarion's jaw opened, revealing rows of developing teeth. The Thulian's tail arched, venom sacs visibly swelling. Kyle Thas took 1 step toward the notebook. 3 infant apex predators screamed in unified hostility, a sound that made his species' instinctive threat response kick in hard. He backed toward the door, hands raised. The cubs advanced, moving in coordinated threat display. Not attacking, but making absolutely clear he was not welcome near their notebook. He sealed the door behind him, heart racing. Through the viewing panel, he watched the cubs immediately turn on each other, aggressive postures resuming, the fragile peace shattered. The Scarion bumped the notebook with its nose. All 3 cubs looked at it, the tension drained from their small bodies. They settled back around it, returning to their impossible pile. Did that notebook just stop them from fighting? Vexia's voice was barely audible. Kyle Thas pulled off his helmet, feeling cold dread settle in his chest. "It's not the notebook. Or if it is, we just proved we can't remove it without triggering full territorial aggression." "Then what do we do?" "We wait for the human to come back," Kael'thas said grimly. "Because apparently, she's the only one who understands what's happening here." Emma Johnson arrived precisely at 800 hours, carrying 3 feeding bowls and humming that same inexplicable melody. She didn't request permission to enter. She didn't check with the observation team. She simply keyed her access code. "Junior caretaker clearance," Kyle Thas noted with mounting alarm, and walked into the containment room like it was a storage closet. "Morning, babies. Who's hungry?" The transformation was instantaneous. 3 sets of predatory eyes locked onto her, and instead of threat displays, the cubs scrambled to their feet with what could only be described as enthusiasm. The Vrack's cubs all were spines flattened completely. The Scarion made a chirping sound that Kael'thas had never heard from its species. The Thulian actually bounced. Emma set down the bowls in a neat line. Okay, single file. You know the drill. The cubs lined up. Apex predators from 3 different death worlds formed an orderly queue, like they were waiting for recess. What? Vexia's voice cracked. What is she doing? Emma sat cross-legged, picking up her notebook while the cubs ate. She was writing, occasionally glancing at them with casual affection. The cubs ate peacefully, side by side, without a single aggressive interaction. I need to speak with her, Kael'thas said, already moving toward the communication panel. Now. He activated the intercom. Miss Johnson, this is Chief Kael'thas. When you're finished, please report to the observation deck. Emma looked up at the camera and waved. Sure thing. Give me like 5 minutes. She finished her notes, patted each cub on the head, patted them like they were domesticated companion animals, and walked out. The cubs returned to their pile around the notebook without any prompting. Emma arrived at the observation deck, looking mildly confused by the assembly of senior scientists now crowding the space. Zara's hologram had been joined by 3 other remote xenobiologists, all staring at Emma like she'd just performed spontaneous transmutation. Did I do something wrong? Emma asked. The food's the right nutritional blend. I checked the specs twice. Ms. Johnson, Kael'thas began carefully, do you understand what you've accomplished in that room? Fed 3 hungry babies. Those aren't babies. Those are apex predators. 3 different species that kill each other on sight in the wild. Emma glanced through the viewing panel at the sleeping cubs. Okay. But they're also babies. Babies get overwhelmed in new places. New smells, new sounds, everything scary and unfamiliar. She shrugged. They just needed someone to help them feel safe. Your notebook, Vexia interjected. What's in it? Feeding schedules, behavioral observations, comfort patterns. You know, standard stuff. Emma opened it, showing pages of handwritten notes with simple sketches. This one, she pointed at a drawing of the Vrack's cub, likes having his spines brushed. This one gets anxious if feeding time is late. The little guy prefers warmer ambient temperature. You talk to them, Kael'thas said slowly. You just talk to them, and they responded. Well, yeah. I mean, I know they don't understand English, but tone matters, right? I just let them know they're safe, that I'm not scared of them, that this is their space now. Emma looked genuinely puzzled by their reactions. It's the same approach I used at the animal shelter back home. Works on dogs, cats, even the occasional aggressive rooster. Miss Johnson, Zara's hologram leaned forward. Predator cubs don't respond to emotional comfort. They respond to dominance, hierarchies, food availability, and threat assessment. What you're describing is impossible. Well, these ones did. Emma's tone was polite but firm. Maybe they're smarter than you think? Or maybe someone just needed to actually talk to them instead of at them. Vexia pulled up a live feed showing the cubs now engaged in what could only be called play. The Vracks and Scarion were gently wrestling while the Thulian watched, occasionally joining in with careful pounces. They're playing, Vexia whispered. Species that should be mortal enemies are playing together. Yeah, that started yesterday after I left, Emma said cheerfully. It's good for their development, social bonding, motor skills, all that. Kael'thas felt something fundamental cracking in his understanding of xenobiology. Our protocols are designed for aggressive separation. We don't have any procedures for peaceful multi-species apex predator groups because such groups don't exist. Maybe they should, Emma suggested. I mean, if it works, why separate them? They're clearly happier together. Because every principle of predator conservation science says this shouldn't work. But it does. Emma looked at him steadily. Maybe your principles need updating. Zara was running calculations on her display, tentacles moving frantically. If fear-based protocols are actually increasing aggression in captive juveniles, maybe they just needed someone who wasn't afraid of them. Emma said quietly. I wasn't scared when I walked in. I just saw 3 scared babies in a new place. So I treated them like scared babies. The cubs had stopped playing and were now grooming each other. The Scarion carefully cleaning the Vrax's spines while the Thulian curled against both of them. Every expert in the room was watching their entire field collapse in real time. Show us, Kailthas said abruptly. Whatever you're doing, demonstrate it. We need to understand. Emma shrugged and headed back to the containment room. The entire observation team crowded against the viewing panel, sensors recording every measurable variable. She entered the room, and the cubs reacted immediately, but not with aggression. They approached her with clear recognition, the Vrax cub making soft chirping sounds, the Scarion's tail swishing in what species-specific behavioral analysis identified as contentment. Hey, sweethearts, Emma said, her voice warm and relaxed. Want to see what I've been drawing? She sat down and opened her notebook, showing them the pages. The cubs gathered around, genuinely fascinated. Emma had sketched each of them in surprising detail. The Vrax's distinctive spine pattern, the Scarion's unique facial markings, the Thulian's tail structure. See? That's you, she told the Vrax cub, pointing at the drawing. You're getting bigger every day, and this is your friend. She indicated the Scarion sketch, looking very handsome. The cubs settled around her, utterly calm. Emma kept up a gentle stream of narration, her tone more important than her words. When she closed the notebook and set it down, the cubs immediately positioned themselves around it. Their learning the notebook means safety, routine, care, Emma explained to the cameras. It's a constant in their environment, something familiar that smells like me and represents all our positive interactions. Zara's hologram suddenly blazed brighter, her entire form vibrating with realization. Emotional broadcast, she breathed. By the ancestors, it's emotional broadcast. What? Vexia turned from the viewing panel. Humans project emotional states unconsciously. We've known this, it's documented in human-alien interaction studies. But we never considered the implications for juvenile predators. Zara's tentacles moved frantically across her interface. Predator cubs, especially apex predators, have highly sensitive threat assessment capabilities. They don't just read visual cues or pheromones, they read the emotional intent of nearby creatures. Kailthas felt the pieces clicking into place. And Emma broadcasts no fear. More than that, she broadcasts genuine care, affection, safety. Zara pulled up neurological scans. When she enters that room, she's radiating calm and protective instinct. The cubs imprint on that emotional signature. It overrides their species-level antagonism because her emotional broadcast is stronger than their instinctive responses. The notebook? Vexia asked. Secondary, Zara confirmed. It carries her emotional signature, her scent, yes, but also the residual emotional imprint from her handling it. She's marked it as a safe object through repeated positive association. The cubs recognize it as an extension of her protective presence. Emma had stood up and was preparing to leave. The cubs didn't follow her to the door. They returned to their pile, but this time they were grooming each other. The Thulian carefully cleaning the Scarion's ears, while the Vrax sprawled contentedly across both of them. "They're bonded," Vexia whispered. "Genuinely bonded. Not just tolerating each other, they've formed a family unit." "Through Emma's mediation," Kael'thas added. "She served as the emotional anchor that allowed them to see each other as safe rather than threatening." Emma returned to the observation deck, looking between their stunned faces. "So, they're good to stay together then? You're not going to separate them?" "Ms. Johnson," Kael'thas said carefully, "what you've created is completely unprecedented in galactic conservation history. These cubs will likely remain peaceful as they mature. We'll need to monitor them, of course, but the bonding that's occurred at this developmental stage should persist." "Oh, good," Emma smiled. "They really do seem happier together." "You just upended centuries of predator biology research," Vexia said, still staring at the playing cubs. Emma laughed. "I just wasn't scared. They're babies, and babies need someone who makes them feel safe. That's not complicated." But it was. Zara was already composing emergency communications to the Galactic Council. Kael'thas was mentally drafting the complete protocol overhaul that would be required. Vexia was calculating how many other incompatible predator groups might benefit from human emotional mediation. "We're going to need human consultants," Kael'thas said finally, "for difficult cases across the conservation network. Your species' emotional broadcast capability, it's invaluable." "Sure, I can help," Emma said easily. "But maybe also consider that treating them like the scared babies they are instead of just dangerous predators might work even without humans. You know, just be less afraid, show more care." The revolutionary simplicity of it hung in the air. Every conservation protocol in the galaxy was about to be rewritten because a human volunteer from an animal shelter had treated apex predators with the same gentle kindness she'd shown to abandoned dogs. Within 48 hours, Kael'thas had drafted the new emotional safety protocols, guidelines that prioritized calm presence over defensive posturing when approaching juvenile predators. Vexia was already deep into human caretaker technique analysis, watching hours of footage from Earth animal shelters, studying the patterns of voice modulation and gentle approach that humans used instinctively. Zara's paper, titled "Human Emotional Influence on Apex Predator Juvenile Bonding Behaviors," was being fast-tracked through peer review. She'd already received 17 requests for collaboration and 5 facilities demanding immediate human staff consultations. Emma, meanwhile, was updating her notebook with that day's feeding times. "Okay, same time tomorrow? I have a shift at the shelter after this." She sketched a quick drawing of all 3 cubs sleeping together, their small bodies intertwined in peaceful rest. "There we go. They like looking at the pictures." She set the notebook carefully in its usual spot. The cubs, already drowsy from their morning play session, immediately gravitated toward it. "You're leaving it again?" Kael'thas asked. "Yeah, they get upset if it's not here." Emma gathered her things, humming that same simple melody as she headed for the door. Kael'thas and Vexia watched her go, then turned back to the viewing panel where 3 apex predators, species that had been killing each other for millions of years, were curled together in contentment. "If human presence can calm apex predators this effectively," Vexia said slowly, "what else have we misunderstood about interspecies conflict?" "Humans might be natural mediators," Kael'thas replied. "Not through superior technology or diplomatic training, but through something as simple as emotional projection. New training programs were already being designed, incorporating human emotional approaches. The cubs would become the primary case study for peaceful multi-species predator coexistence. Emma had been offered a permanent consultant position. She'd accepted immediately, mentioning she needed the extra hours. Her notebook was now stored in a protective case when she wasn't present. The one time Kailthas had suggested moving it to prevent dependency. All 3 cubs had simultaneously refused food for 6 hours until it was returned. Emma was checking her phone when Kailthas caught up with her at the exit. "Oh, can someone feed them lunch? I've got 3 dogs and a parrot to check on." "You care for more animals?" Kailthas asked. "Yeah, it's kind of my thing. Why?" Emma looked genuinely curious. "No reason. We'll handle lunch." Emma waved and walked out, already humming again, completely unaware that she'd revolutionized galactic conservation science. Through the observation panel, the cubs shifted in their sleep. The Vrax's spine brushed the Scarion's flank. The Thulian's tail curled protectively around both. 3 species that should be enemies, breathing in peaceful synchronization. Just another Tuesday for the human who treated apex predators like babies who needed kindness. The galaxy would never approach predator conservation the same way again.